The call was brief, and his voice was cold. "Yes, officer? There's a man sleeping in the lobby of my building. He's clearly homeless. It's a security issue. Please send someone to remove him." As he hung up, Mark Adams felt a familiar twinge of irritation, but also something else, a quiet whisper of shame he quickly pushed down. From his 12th floor office window, the city glittered like a circuit board of ambition and success, a world he had fought tooth and nail to be a part of. Order, efficiency, and control were the pillars of his life, and the disheveled figure curled up on the polished marble downstairs was a breach in all of them. Mark was the building manager for the sleek glass and steel Pinnacle Tower, a role he wore like a suit of armor. His days were a meticulous ballet of tenant complaints, maintenance schedules, and financial reports. He took pride in the building's impeccable appearance, its silent, humming elevators, its spotless floors. To him, it was a temple of productivity, and anything or anyone that disrupted its sterile harmony was a problem to be solved. The homeless man who had appeared a few nights ago was the most visible problem he'd faced in months. He was just there, a silent, still shape in the far corner of the lobby, wrapped in a thin, worn coat, a faded backpack serving as his pillow. Mark had initially issued warnings, speaking in a firm, detached tone about private property and loitering laws. The man would just nod slowly, his eyes tired and distant, and whisper, "I'll be gone soon. Just need a little rest." But he never was. This morning, seeing him there again, a stain on the pristine lobby, was the final straw for Mark. It was an image that clashed violently with the building's chrome and glass aesthetic, and more importantly, it was bad for business. What would the new tech startup tenants on the 5th floor think, or the wealthy law partners on the 15th? Perception was everything. So he made the call. As he waited for the police, he decided to go down himself to ensure the situation was handled without a scene. The lobby was cavernous and quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the climate control. The man was still asleep, his breathing a shallow rhythm. Up close, Mark could see the details he'd missed from upstairs, the neatly patched tear on the sleeve of the coat, the carefully worn but clean shoes, the way the man's hands were clasped as if in prayer even in sleep. On the floor beside him, partly tucked under the backpack, was a sealed white envelope. Mark's eyes kept darting to it. It looked starkly out of place, too formal, too clean for its surroundings. Driven by a curiosity that overrode his usual protocols, and thinking it might be discarded trash, he bent down and quietly picked it up. The envelope was addressed in an elegant looping cursive, "To the manager of this building." There was no name, just the title. His title. A strange chill, unrelated to the lobby's cool air, passed over him. He turned it over. It wasn't sealed. Glancing at the still sleeping man, then at the building entrance where the police would soon arrive, Mark's fingers hesitated for only a second before he slid out the single sheet of paper inside. The writing was the same beautiful script, but the ink was a faded blue, and the paper had the soft, creamy texture of something old and cherished. He began to read. "To whoever finds this, if you are reading this, then my son, James, is likely nearby. Please do not be alarmed by him. He is not dangerous. He is simply very, very tired. James is a veteran. He served 2 tours overseas, and he brought the war home with him in ways you cannot see. The doctors have names for it, but I just call it a broken spirit. He finds comfort in quiet, orderly spaces. The chaos of the shelters is too much for him. Once he told me the quiet hum of a building like yours reminded him of the base at night, a sound that meant for a few hours he was safe. He is searching for that feeling again. He carries a backpack. In it you will find his honorable discharge papers, a photograph of his unit, and the Purple Heart he never wanted but earned with courage I cannot fathom. There was also a bottle of water and the last chocolate bar I gave him. He saves it for a rainy day. I am writing this because I am his mother, and I am dying. The cancer has taken its course. My greatest fear is not for myself, but for James. The world moves so fast, and he moves so slowly now. He gets confused. He seeks out places that feel familiar and safe. If he has chosen your building, it is because something in its light, its order, spoke to the part of him that still remembers how to stand guard, how to protect. He is not a trespasser. He is, in his heart, still standing watch. I do not ask for money or for a handout. I only ask for a moment of your kindness. If you could let him rest, just for a little while, in a corner where he feels that strange sense of peace, if you could see the hero beneath the worn coat, that would be a mercy greater than you can know. With a mother's eternal hope, Eleanor W. Carter. Mark's hand trembled. The words on the page seemed to vibrate with love so profound it felt like a physical weight. He looked from the letter to the sleeping man, James. The word veteran echoed in his mind, followed by Purple Heart. This wasn't a homeless man. This was someone's son, a soldier, a hero who now found solace in the sterile, humming quiet of a building Mark managed, a building Mark just called the police to have him thrown out of.
The shame he had briefly felt earlier now flooded him, hot and suffocating. His pillar of order felt suddenly cruel, his efficiency heartless. He thought of his own comfortable life, his own warm bed, his own mother who lived safely in a sunny retirement community. He had judged a book by its torn and dusty cover, and in doing so, had completely failed to read the story inside. Just then, the glass doors slid open, and 2 police officers walked in, their radios crackling. They nodded at Mark, their eyes scanning the lobby and settling on James. "That the gentleman you called about, sir?" one of them asked, his hand resting casually on his belt. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. This was the pivot point, the split second where the story could turn into another cold transaction, another person being moved along, unseen and unknown. He looked at James, then down at the letter clutched in his hand, at the mother's plea frozen in ink. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Officers," Mark said, his voice softer, thicker than he intended. I made a mistake." The officers looked at him, puzzled. "There's no issue here. This is James. He's a guest." The older officer raised an eyebrow. "A guest, sir? You reported a homeless individual loitering." "I was wrong," Mark said firmly, the conviction growing as he spoke. "He's a veteran. He's resting. There's no disturbance. I apologize for wasting your time." He walked over to them, projecting an authority that now served a different purpose. "It's been handled. Thank you for your swift response." After a moment of silent assessment, the officers shrugged, offered a brief nod, and left. The lobby was quiet again. Mark stood there, the silence now feeling sacred, not sterile. He walked slowly back to where James slept. He carefully folded the letter, placed it back in its envelope, and gently tucked it beside the backpack. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He sat down on the cool marble floor, leaning against the wall a few feet away from James. He would wait. He would stand watch. About 20 minutes later, James stirred. His eyes opened, blinking slowly in the bright lobby light. He saw Mark sitting there and immediately began to gather his things, a look of resigned apology on his face. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm going. I didn't mean to overstay." "James," said Mark, his voice gentle, "it's okay. You're not in any trouble." He held up the envelope. I read your mother's letter." James froze, his eyes widening, then filling with a deep, bottomless sorrow. He looked at the letter as if it were a ghost. You read it?" he whispered. "I did. And I am so sorry, James, for everything." He didn't specify everything what, but the weight of the apology hung in the air between them. Tears welled in James's eyes, but he didn't let them fall. He just nodded, a slow, painful acknowledgement. "She was my anchor. Now the chain is broken, and I'm just drifting." "You're not drifting. Not anymore. Come with me." He stood and offered a hand. James, after a long moment of hesitation, took it. Mark led him not out of the building, but to the small private cafeteria in the basement used by building staff. He bought 2 cups of hot coffee and 2 warm breakfast sandwiches. They sat at a corner table. Over the next hour, Mark listened. He listened to fragments of James's story, the camaraderie of his unit, the noise and the fear, the loss of a friend, the return to a world that felt too loud and too fast. He spoke of his mother, her unwavering faith in him, her long illness. Mark shared little about himself, but in that act of listening, he gave James something far more valuable than the food: recognition. When they finished, Mark made a few calls. He had a friend who ran a nonprofit that helped veterans transition to civilian life, focusing on housing and counseling. By that afternoon, James had a temporary bed in a quiet, structured facility and an appointment with a counselor who specialized in trauma. Mark drove him there himself. As James got out of the car, clutching his backpack, he turned to Mark and asked the single word, holding a universe of confusion and gratitude. "Why?" he asked. Mark thought of the letter, of the mother's love that had bridged the gap between two strangers. "Because your mother asked me to," he said quietly, "and because it was the right thing to do." From that day on, the Pinnacle Tower had a new, unofficial policy. Mark placed a discreet, comfortable bench in a quiet, sun-drenched alcove off the main lobby, a spot that was warm and peaceful. He never officially announced it, but the security team knew. If someone who seemed lost, who seemed weary, found their way to that bench, they were to be left in peace. They were to be offered a cup of water or a coffee if they wanted it. They were, in Mark's new understanding, simply resting. Sometimes the greatest acts of management aren't about maintaining order, but about cultivating mercy. He kept Eleanor Carter's letter in his desk drawer. On difficult days, he would take it out and read it again. It reminded him that every person has a story etched in invisible ink on their soul, a story of love, of loss, of battles fought in faraway lands or in the quiet corners of a breaking heart. And sometimes all it takes to read that story is a moment of pause, a decision to choose compassion over convenience, to see the human being before the problem. Sometimes the most profound changes begin not with a grand gesture, but with a simple decision not to make a call. Share this story if it reminded you that behind every face is a hidden letter, waiting to be read with kindness.